Out on the old trails of this country, you learn pretty quick that a bad dirt bike will stay with you a whole lot longer than a good one. The good bikes fade into warm memories, smooth power, easy starts, Sunday rides with friends. But the bad ones? They leave bruises, broken bolts, and stories you'll still be telling at the coffee shop 30 years later. And that's what brings us here today. After 3 full chapters of the most cursed machines ever to hit American dirt, you'd think we'd reach the bottom of the barrel. But no, there's a deeper layer. The strange ones, the experiments, the bikes that weren't just bad, they were baffling. So settle in. Here comes part 4 of the most hated dirt bikes ever built. 1974, Husqvarna 450 Desert Master. Back in the early to mid-70s, Husqvarna was riding high. Their bikes were light, sharp, and trusted by just about every serious off-road rider in America. So when folks heard a new 450 class Desert Enduro Husky was coming, expectations were sky high. But the Desert Master didn't land the way people hoped. It was heavier than the earlier Huskys, slower to respond, and carried a kind of sluggish weight that riders felt the moment they lifted it off the stand. Out on open country, the power delivery never quite settled in. It came on unevenly, never smooth, never predictable, especially when you tried to hold a steady pace across rolling desert or fast fire roads. The suspension didn't help matters either. The front and rear never felt like they were working together, leaving the bike harsh in chop and uneasy in high-speed washboard. Plenty of longtime Husky riders walked away shaking their heads, saying it just didn't feel like a Husqvarna anymore. Today, collectors still pick them up, mostly out of curiosity or nostalgia, with clean examples running anywhere from $2,400 to $6,700, depending on condition and restoration quality. Rokon 340 Automatic. When the Rokon 340 Automatic first rolled into American dirt, folks didn't quite know what to make of it. On paper, the idea sounded bold. Take a Sachs snowmobile engine, bolt on a CVT, and create a dirt bike that could crawl, climb, and cruise without ever touching a clutch. But once riders threw a leg over it, the truth came fast. The throttle and CVT worked together in a way no one could predict. It surged, it lagged, it snapped forward when you least expected it. Controlling the thing felt less like riding and more like wrestling. The weight didn't help either. The bike carried its mass high and oddly, and the chassis layout made the handling feel downright foreign. In tight woods or loose hills, it didn't just feel awkward, it felt unsafe. And when something broke, good luck. Many components weren't standard MX or Enduro parts, turning simple repairs into scavenger hunts. It's no surprise the 340 shows up on almost every worst bikes list you can find, remembered more for fear than for fun. Today, collectors chase them mostly for their oddball charm, with prices ranging from $3,000 to $6,000, and clean, rare examples climbing as high as $8,000 to $13,000. CZ250 Enduro. Back in the ISDT days, CZ was a true powerhouse. Their race bikes were tough, quick, and trusted by some of the best riders in the world. So when the 250 Enduro arrived, expectations were sky high. Folks figured it would carry the same magic into the woods. Instead, riders found a machine that felt stuck in another era. CZ reused an older chassis design. Heavy, slow to steer, and nowhere near as lively as the new Japanese frames showing up in the mid-70s. The engine didn't help much. It made modest power, and the ignition system was so weak that starting the bike, and keeping it running, became part of the challenge. Many riders talked about sudden stalls, misfires, and the constant worry that the spark might disappear at the worst moment. The suspension finished the job. With short travel and a stiff, unforgiving feel, the bike struggled on real enduro terrain. Rocks and roots felt harsher, sand felt heavier, and long rides wore people out fast. Plenty of riders summed it up the same way, a 60s bike being forced to ride in the 70s. Today, collectors still buy them mainly for history, with values ranging from $2,500 to $7,000, depending on originality and condition. Penton 125 Mudlark. Through most of the 1970s, Penton built a reputation ordinary riders could trust. Their machines were sharp, durable, and purpose-built for real off-road work. But the 125 Mudlark stands as one of the rare times the brand truly missed the mark. Instead of the crisp, confident feel people expected, riders were met with a chassis built by Wassel, a frame that flexed in all the wrong places. The bike never felt planted. Turn in, stand up, off-camber work. Everything carried a vague, unsettled feel that made the Mudlark uncomfortable, and at times downright unsafe. The suspension didn't help its case. Beater forks and shocks on this model were soft, wallowy, and had poor rebound control, giving the bike a habit of hopping and skipping across rough ground. Add in awkward ergonomics, bars, seat, and pegs that never quite lined up, and you had a machine that didn't suit trail riding, racing, or anything in between. In the end, the Mudlark offered no real strengths, only frustration. Today, collectors buy them mostly as a curious footnote in Penton history, with typical values falling around $2,500 to $5,000, though exceptional, well-restored Pentons can bring more. 1973 to 1974, Yamaha SC500. In the early 70s, the open-class 500 was the wild beast of the dirt world. Big power, big torque, and meant for riders who could hang on. But Yamaha's SC500 was a beast of a different kind, and not in a good way. The big air-cooled single ran hot, pinged under load, and had a bad habit of flirting with seizure when pushed hard on warm days. When the power did come on, it hit like a hammer. There was nothing smooth or friendly about it, and with the older suspension and chassis designs Yamaha was still using at the time, the rest of the bike simply couldn't keep up. The front end felt nervous, the rear kicked in rough terrain, and the whole machine carried a harsh, rattling vibration that made long rides a chore. It didn't take long for magazines and old-school riders to start placing the SC500 in their worst Yamaha lists. Not because it was boring, but because it was genuinely intimidating in all the wrong ways. Today, collectors mostly chase it for its place in open-class history, with decent examples bringing $2,500 to $4,500, and clean, well-restored bikes often landing in the $3,700 to $5,000 range. 1978, Honda CR125M. Back in the late 70s, Honda wasn't afraid to experiment, and one of their boldest ideas showed up on the 1978 CR125M, a 23-inch front wheel. On paper, it was supposed to improve stability and float over rough terrain. But out on real American dirt, the story was different. The bike carried a strange feel at the bars. Turn-in felt delayed, the front end didn't bite the way riders expected, and the feedback from the ground came through dull and uncertain. The unusual tire size created its own headaches. Finding replacement 23-inch rubber was tough even back then, and tuning pressure or swapping compounds was nearly impossible. Whatever theoretical advantage Honda had hoped for never showed up on the track or trail. Compared to the standard 21-inch setup, riders found no real gains, only compromises. Before long, the community labeled the 23-inch experiment a dead end. Interesting to look at, frustrating to ride, and destined to fade away. Today, collectors seek them mostly for their oddity and rarity. Nice examples tend to bring $3,500 to $5,500, while project-grade bikes usually fall in the $1,500 to $3,000 range. 1980, Kawasaki KX125. When Kawasaki rolled out the early Unitrack models, riders were excited. A rising rate single shock system sounded like the future, and on paper, the 1980 KX125 should have been a class standout. But once people got time in the saddle, disappointment set in fast. The little 125 just didn't have the muscle. Its power band felt more like a mild enduro bike than a snappy motocrosser, and it simply didn't pull the way a proper race 125 needed to. The suspension, the very thing that was supposed to make this bike shine, wasn't quite ready for prime time either. Early Unitrack tuning left the rear end feeling odd and unpredictable, with a rebound character that took hours to chase and still never felt quite right. Combined with a chassis that wasn't especially light or agile, the KX125 struggled to find its footing on real MX tracks. Most riders today look back at this era as the moment when Kawasaki was still learning the ropes, not yet ready to take the spotlight in the small bore class. As a collectible, it sits in the middle of the pack, interesting for its place in Unitrack history, but not exactly coveted. Typical values run $1,500 to $3,000, with fully restored show-quality builds occasionally climbing into the $4,000 to $6,000 range. 1987, Suzuki RM250. By the mid-'80s, Suzuki's RM250 had already carved out a loyal following. The early full floater models were sharp, competitive machines that felt a step ahead of the pack. But when the 1987 version arrived, riders immediately sensed something was off. The redesigned rear suspension, meant to modernize the platform, actually took a step backward. It lacked the supple, planted feel of the earlier full floaters, and on rough tracks it never settled the way a serious racer needed it to. The engine didn't help much either. It ran clean, but it didn't have the punch, that hard, exciting mid-range hit that defined a great 250 two-stroke. Instead, it felt mild, almost shy, offering no real advantage over its competition. Combined with handling that was polite but not particularly quick, the whole bike carried a soft, forgettable personality. Riders often describe it as fine, but not fast, and in motocross, that's not a compliment. Looking back, the '87 RM250 is often considered the low point of Suzuki's late '80s 250s, a quiet lull between two stronger generations. Today, values reflect that reputation. Most examples run $2,000 to $3,500, with especially clean or fully restored bikes occasionally touching $4,000. 1997, Honda CR250R. When Honda rolled out the first aluminum frame CR250R in 1997, the industry buzzed. A twin-spar chassis on a two-stroke motocrosser sounded like the future, lighter, stiffer, more precise. But the moment riders hit real American dirt, the excitement cooled fast. That brand new frame was too stiff, and the suspension technology of the day simply couldn't keep up. The bike rode harsh, transmitted every bump straight to the rider, and lost the natural compliance that earlier steel-frame CRs were famous for. With the motor's strong, hard-hitting power delivery, the combination became a handful. The chassis didn't flex when you needed it to, the rear struggled for traction, and cornering wasn't the fluid, confidence-building experience Honda fans expected. Before long, riders began calling it one of the most uncomfortable and least forgiving CR250RS ever built. Still, you can't deny its place in history. It marked Honda's first step into the aluminum frame era, a turning point that shaped the next 2 decades of motocross design. Today, most examples trade hands in the $2,000 to $3,500 range, with exceptionally clean, low-hour bikes occasionally reaching $4,500 for collectors who want the first of its kind. 2009, Honda CRF450R. When Honda introduced fuel injection to the CRF450R in 2009, riders expected a leap forward, smoother power, better throttle response, and sharper handling. What they got instead was one of the most polarizing CRFs ever built. The FI mapping felt abrupt, giving the bike an on-off character that made mid-corner throttle control a real challenge. Instead of rolling on smoothly, the power snapped, surged, and upset the chassis at exactly the wrong moments. Handling took a hit too. Compared to the rock-solid 2008 model, the 09 felt nervous and unsettled, especially in rutted corners or high-speed chop. Riders talked about fighting the front end, chasing traction at the rear, and never quite feeling locked in the way a 450 should. Add in higher maintenance costs and questions about long-term durability, and many longtime Honda fans walked away disappointed. Looking back, the 2009 CRF 450R is widely seen as a clear step backward, a rare miss in an otherwise legendary line. Today, it sits at the lower end of the CRF market, typically selling for $1,800 to $3,000 for a clean, good-running example. When you look back across the decades, it's funny how the machines that let us down tend to stick in our memories just as firmly as the ones that carried us through our best rides. Maybe it's the bruises, maybe it's the broken parts, or maybe it's just the stories we've told around tailgates and campfires ever since. These weren't bad bikes because they were slow or cheap. They were bad because they missed the mark in ways riders never forgot. And yet, here we are, still talking about them. That's the strange charm of this old sport. Even the misfires, the oddballs, and the outright mistakes have their place in the story of American dirt riding. So here's to part 4, the strange chapter. And if you've still got a tale about a bike that tried to buck you off, the comments are wide open.